I stood there frozen, at the threshold of my own bedroom door, or rather, what used to be my bedroom, watching 12 suitcases scattered across the bed, where I had slept beside my husband for more than 20 years. The young daughter-in-law, Melissa, was organizing her mother's clothes in the drawers that still held the scent of my Anthony, who had died 2 years ago, while giving me a smile that seemed to have been cut with a razor blade. "Mrs. Carmen," she said, without even looking at me, "your room is now in the back. My mother needs more space, and this is the best room in the house." The words left her mouth with the same naturalness as someone commenting about the weather, but each syllable pierced my chest like glass shards. I felt my knees go weak, my vision blurred, and for a moment I thought I might faint right there, in front of the woman who had just expelled me from the sanctuary where I had built an entire life. In that moment of shock and humiliation, my mind flew back in time, trying to understand how I had gotten to that point. I, Carmen Oliveira, at 62 years old, had become a stranger in my own house. But it hadn't always been like this. There was a time when this house breathed love and respect, when my Anthony still walked these hallways with his broad smile and his weekend projects. We built every square meter of this home with our own hands. He, an experienced mason. Me, a retired teacher who wasn't afraid to get her nails dirty with cement mortar. I clearly remember the day we decided to buy this vacant lot in the Hope Valley neighborhood. It was 1985. I was only 25 years old and had just graduated from teaching college. Anthony worked Monday through Monday to gather the bricks, while I gave private lessons in the afternoons and weekends to supplement our income. For 4 years, our routine was sacred. We woke up at 5 in the morning, drank black coffee with sugar bread, and he left for construction work while I headed to the municipal school where I taught children from 6 to 10 years old. In the evening, we would meet at the lot and work until we could no longer see in the dark. My hands became calloused from carrying so many blocks and mixing mortar. My feet swelled inside rubber boots. My face burned from so much sun. But each wall that went up was a victory. Each room that took shape was a piece of our dream materializing. The master bedroom was the last room to be finished. Anthony insisted on personally installing each outlet, each switch, each finishing detail. "This is going to be our castle, my queen," he would say, running his rough hand over my sweaty face. "Here we're going to grow old together, raise our children, and one day we'll tell our grandchildren how we built all this from scratch." We painted the walls a soft blue that reminded us of the sky from the countryside where we were both born. We bought our first double bed at a used furniture store, a solid wood piece that Anthony restored with such care that it looked new. It was in that bed that I conceived my only child, Raphael. It was there that I spent sleepless nights when he had a fever. It was there that I cried when we lost 3 babies before they could breathe. And it was there that I held my husband's hand in his final hours, when cancer finally defeated his warrior's strength. Raphael grew up seeing our example of struggle and determination, but something was lost along the way. Perhaps because we gave him everything we didn't have, perhaps because he never had to fight for anything, my son became a comfortable man, dependent on others' approval and incapable of making difficult decisions. At 35 years old, he still lived with us when he met Melissa at a business administration graduation party. She was everything I hadn't been in my youth: platinum blonde, always manicured nails, designer clothes, spoke fluent English, and had that big city way about her that intimidated anyone who came from the countryside. Raphael fell madly in love, or rather, became completely dazzled by that woman who represented a world he had always wanted to belong to but never knew how to reach. When they announced their engagement, 6 months after meeting, I tried to hide my concern. It wasn't just motherly jealousy, although I admit a little bit of that existed. It was feminine intuition, that sixth sense that we women develop throughout life, to identify people who aren't what they seem. Melissa never looked into my eyes when we talked. Her questions about my life sounded perfunctory, as if she were fulfilling a social obligation. When Raphael wasn't around, she barely spoke to me. And there was something in the way she looked at our house, not with affection or curiosity, but with a cold and calculating evaluation, as if she were mentally cataloging each object and its possible value. The wedding took place in an expensive ceremony that they couldn't afford. Raphael borrowed money from the bank, used all his unemployment fund, and still needed my help to cover the costs. I handed over my retired teacher's savings without hesitation because I wanted to see my son happy. Melissa chose every detail of the party: imported flowers, designer dress, buffet at a sophisticated venue, gift registry at a chic department store. I felt out of place at my own family celebration, wearing my best outfit, which even so seemed provincial next to her guests, and trying to talk to people who treated me with distant politeness, as if I were the family maid and not the groom's mother. During the honeymoon in Cancun, another expense that weighed on the family budget, I was alone in the house for the first time since Anthony's death. It was during those 2 weeks of silence that I began to notice signs I had ignored. Melissa had already started making small changes to the environment. The dining table tablecloth had been switched to a neutral color. The picture frames with family photos were temporarily stored for general cleaning. My little pots of aromatic plants, which had always been in the kitchen window, had been reorganized to get better light in a less visible area. When I questioned these changes, she responded with that icy smile, "Mrs. Carmen, I'm just trying to modernize the environment a little. I'm sure you'll like the final result." The final result began to reveal itself gradually in the following months. Melissa convinced Raphael that they needed more privacy, so the TV room where we used to gather after dinner became a kind of private office for the couple. Meals, once sacred moments of conversation and coexistence, became silent encounters where she played on her phone while I tried to make conversation with my son. Raphael, visibly torn between pleasing his wife and maintaining respect for his mother, chose the easier path, pretending he didn't notice the growing tension and taking refuge in long hours of overtime work. The situation deteriorated even further when Melissa became pregnant. I was radiant with the prospect of being a grandmother, but my joy was quickly suffocated by the way she turned the pregnancy into a manipulation tool. Every suggestion I made about the baby, from names to room decoration, was delicately discarded. "Mrs. Carmen, I know you have experience, but times have changed. Nowadays we follow more modern methods." When I offered the little clothes I had saved from Raphael, she thanked me with falseness. "How cute, but I already bought everything new. I don't really believe in these used things for babies." Each rejection was a small but deep cut to my hope of participating in raising my grandchild. Unfortunately, Melissa lost the baby in the 5th month of pregnancy. It was a very painful period for the whole family, and I genuinely sympathized with her pain. I tried to get closer, offer the support that a more experienced woman can give to another going through such a loss, but she completely rejected me, creating an even higher barrier between us. Raphael, devastated by the loss, became overprotective of his wife, attending to all her whims and interpreting any frustration of mine as lack of sensitivity to the difficult moment they were going through. It was during this vulnerable period that the most drastic changes in the house dynamics began. Melissa claimed she needed space to process grief and began questioning practically everything in our routine. My friends, who used to come for coffee on Saturday afternoons, suddenly made too much noise for someone who was in emotional recovery. My habit of listening to music while cooking disturbed her concentration to read the self-help books that the psychologist had recommended. Even my garden, my sacred refuge since Anthony's death, became a source of conflict when she complained that the flowers attracted bees that could be dangerous. People close to us began to notice the situation. My sister Helen, always more direct than me, couldn't contain herself during a visit. "Carmen, you're being expelled from your own house and pretending you don't see it. This girl is manipulating you, and Raphael is letting it happen." My neighbor Mrs. Conception, with whom I've shared confidences for more than 20 years, was even clearer. "This daughter-in-law of yours has the face of someone who won't stop until she gets what she wants, and what she wants is to get you out of the way." But I, always too optimistic for my own good, insisted on believing that things would resolve naturally. "It's just a phase," I told myself. "When she recovers from the loss, everything will go back to normal." If you've been following stories like this and want to continue receiving real accounts of overcoming and feminine strength, it's worth subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes that show how ordinary women find extraordinary courage in the most difficult moments, but normal never returned. Instead, the situation escalated to levels I never imagined possible. The last straw came on an ordinary Tuesday in March, when I came home after a routine medical appointment and found Melissa completely reorganizing my wardrobe. She was separating my clothes into piles, to donate, to store, and to keep. When I questioned what was happening, she explained with that exaggerated patience used to talk to children, "Mrs. Carmen, you have so many clothes you haven't worn in years. I thought I'd help do a general cleaning. You'll see how much more organized it gets." My hands trembled when I saw in the donation pile the wool coat that Anthony gave me on our last Christmas together. It was a simple piece, brown in color, but it carried his scent and the memory of that special day. Also, there were 2 blouses I had hand-sewn when we were young and didn't have money to buy ready-made clothes. They were pieces without commercial value, but every thread had history, every patch had love. "These clothes are not for donation," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're important memories for me." Melissa sighed, as if dealing with a stubborn person. "Mrs. Carmen, you can't get so attached to things from the past. You need to move forward. Move forward," as if the objects that carry our history were just emotional garbage. As if the past I built with so much effort were something I should be ashamed of. In that moment, I realized that Melissa wasn't trying to help me. She was trying to erase me. Each change, each improvement, Each modernization was a step in the process of eliminating my presence from that house until I became an uncomfortable tenant in the home I built with my own hands. The final revelation came unexpectedly, through a conversation I overheard by chance. It was a Sunday morning. I was in the backyard watering the plants when I heard voices coming from the living room. Melissa was on the phone with someone, probably her mother, and didn't realize I could hear every word. "Mom, everything is going according to plan. I've already managed to reorganize most of the house my way. The old lady is resisting a little, but Raphael always takes my side when I pressure him. In a few months I'm sure she'll prefer to go live with her sister or somewhere smaller. Then we'll have the whole house to ourselves, and when you come here permanently, there will be plenty of space." The words hit my chest like a punch. It wasn't my paranoia. It wasn't an impression. There really was a deliberate plan to expel me from my own house. And worse, my son, the boy I raised, whom I educated with values of honesty and respect, was being an accomplice to this betrayal. I felt an anger I hadn't experienced in years, mixed with a deep sadness that seemed to have no end. But it was in this emotional darkness that I found something I had lost in recent months, my inner strength. The same determination that made me carry bricks under the scorching sun, that sustained me during the nights of vigil when Raphael was a child, that kept me standing during Anthony's funeral. I had allowed them to treat me as an inconvenient presence in my own life, but that was over. Carmen Oliveira would not be silently erased. That same afternoon, I called my lawyer, Dr. Henry, who had handled all the house documents when Anthony died. "Doctor, I need to review the legal situation of my property. I want to be absolutely sure of what my rights are as the owner of the house." Dr. Henry, an experienced man who had known our family for decades, immediately understood the gravity of the situation. "Mrs. Carmen, the house is registered entirely in your name since your husband's death. Your son has no legal rights whatsoever over the property. If someone is trying to pressure you to leave, this is morally reprehensible and may even constitute coercion." Armed with this legal certainty, I began planning my strategy. I didn't want a family war, but I needed to re-establish the respect I had lost. During the following days, I observed more carefully the dynamics of the house. I realized that Melissa exercised control over Raphael through refined emotional manipulation. When he showed any sympathy for me, or questioned any of her decisions, she reacted with crying, allegations that he didn't support her in her difficult moment, or veiled threats that maybe it would be better if they lived somewhere else. Raphael, a kind but weak-charactered man, always gave in to avoid conflict. The opportunity to act came exactly 1 week after that phone conversation I overheard. Melissa announced that her mother, Mrs. Gloria, would come spend a few days with us because she was facing health problems and needed care. "It's just temporary," Raphael said, but the complicit look between them revealed other plans. "Of course your mother-in-law is welcome," I responded with a smile that hid my strategy. "I'll prepare the guest room with all care." But Melissa had other plans. "Mrs. Carmen, the guest room is too small for my mother. She has back problems and needs a bigger bed, more ventilation, more space for medications. It would be best if she stayed in the master bedroom." I felt the ground slip from under my feet. She was asking me to abandon the sanctuary where I had built an entire life, where I still felt my husband's presence, where I kept our most sacred memories. "And where will I sleep?" I asked, trying to keep my voice controlled. "In the little room in the back. It will be cozy, you'll see." The little room in the back was where we stored tools, old clothes and objects that had no place in the house. It was small, stuffy, without adequate ventilation, practically a storage room. The idea that I, owner of that house, should content myself with that claustrophobic space while a stranger slept in the bed where I cried over my husband's death was so absurd and humiliating that for a moment I couldn't fully process it. But it was exactly in this moment of maximum humiliation that everything became clear in my mind. They weren't asking for a favor, they were executing a plan. It wasn't about caring for a sick mother-in-law, it was about pushing me into a situation so uncomfortable that I myself would ask to leave. It was the final blow in the strategy to expel me from my own house, and that's when I decided to fight back. The next morning, when Mrs. Gloria arrived with her 12 suitcases and her prepotent attitude, she had clearly been instructed by her daughter about how to treat me. I was prepared. I received her with exemplary politeness, helped unload the luggage, prepared a complete breakfast, and behaved like the perfect hostess. Melissa was visibly uncomfortable with my kindness, expecting resistance that didn't come, but she had no idea what I was planning. Throughout the week I maintained the same cordial posture. I cared for Mrs. Gloria as I would care for any guest, prepared special meals for her restrictive diet, accompanied her to medical appointments, listened to her long stories about her youth. Gradually something unexpected began to happen. Mrs. Gloria began to see me as a real person, not as the obstacle her daughter had described. She noticed my genuine kindness, my patience with her special needs, my knowledge about elderly care that I learned during Anthony's final months of life. On a Thursday afternoon, while we were having tea on the porch, Mrs. Gloria asked me a question that changed everything. Carmen, can I ask you something personal? Why did you accept leaving your room without complaining? If it were me, I would have made a scene. It was the moment I had been waiting for. Mrs. Gloria, I'll be honest with you. This is my room, my house, my life, but it's also my son and my daughter-in-law, and sometimes we make sacrifices for family. The problem is when these sacrifices become disrespect, and when kindness is interpreted as weakness. Mrs. Gloria's eyes sparkled with understanding. My daughter told me a very different version of this story. She said you were being difficult, that you didn't accept her as part of the family, that you were making coexistence impossible. I took a deep breath before responding. Mrs. Gloria, you lived with me this week. You saw how I treat people. What do you think? She was silent for a long moment, processing the information. Then she sighed. I think I need to have a serious conversation with my daughter. This conversation happened on Saturday night, and I could hear all of it from the backyard where I pretended to water the plants. Mrs. Gloria confronted Melissa about the lies she had told, about the emotional manipulation she exercised over Raphael, about the disrespect with which she treated me. Melissa, this woman received me in her house like a queen. She took care of me better than you ever have, and you made me believe she was an evil mother-in-law who made your life hell. I'm ashamed to have been an accomplice to this situation. Melissa's reaction was exactly what I expected. Denial, manipulation, attempt to reverse the blame. Mom, you don't understand what it's like to live with her every day. She's subtle, but makes everything difficult. Raphael knows this, but Mrs. Gloria wasn't fooled. Melissa, I'm 68 years old. I know how to recognize a genuine person when I see one, and I know how to recognize a manipulative person too. Carmen is genuine, and you need to rethink your values. On Sunday morning, the tension in the house was palpable. Melissa walked through the hallways with a closed face, clearly furious at having lost the ally she expected to have in her mother. Raphael was confused, realizing that the narrative he had accepted without question was being challenged. And I continued maintaining my serene posture, preparing breakfast as if nothing was happening. It was during this tense meal that I decided to execute the final step of my plan. With a calm but firm voice, I said, Family, I need to communicate a decision I've made. This house was built by me and Anthony with much love and sacrifice. Every brick here has our history. Every room was planned with care to be a home of respect and harmony. Unfortunately, these values are not being respected inside here. I paused, looking directly into each person's eyes. Therefore, I've established some rules that will be valid starting today. First, my room goes back to being my room. Second, decisions about the house are mine, and any change needs my prior authorization. Third, whoever doesn't agree with these rules is free to look for another place to live. The silence that followed was deafening. Melissa tried to protest. Mrs. Carmen, this is absurd. You can't expel your own family because of misunderstandings. But before I could respond, it was Mrs. Gloria who spoke. Melissa, she's not expelling anyone. She's establishing limits in her house, and it's about time. Raphael, visibly shaken, stuttered. Mom, we can talk about this. We've talked enough, son, I replied. Now it's time to act. That afternoon, something extraordinary happened. Mrs. Gloria asked to talk to me privately, and with tears in her eyes, apologized to me. Carmen, I raised my daughter wrong. I gave her everything, never established limits, never taught the value of respect. When her father died, I felt so guilty that I started compensating with gifts and privileges. I turned her into a person who thinks the world revolves around her desires. She held my hand tightly. You remind me of my mother. Strong, fair, with deep roots. Melissa needs to learn these lessons, and maybe you're the only person who can teach them. In the following days, the house dynamics began to transform. Melissa, realizing she had lost all her cards, had to face for the first time the consequences of her actions. Raphael, confronted with the reality of the situation, began to question why he had allowed his wife to disrespect his mother, and Mrs. Gloria became an unexpected ally, helping mediate conflicts and teaching her daughter lessons that should have been learned long ago. The most powerful moment came on a Wednesday night when I found Melissa crying in the kitchen. For the first time since I had known her, her tears seemed genuine. Mrs. Carmen, can I talk to you? We sat at the table where so many silent discussions had taken place. I don't know how to apologize for what I did. I don't even know why I did it. Her words came out broken, loaded with a vulnerability she had never shown. My whole life I was afraid of not being good enough. When I married Raphael, I thought I would finally have a real family. But then I saw that he loves you so much, that you're so important to him, and I got jealous of a mother who only wants the best for her son. I looked at that 32-year-old young woman and recognized something I had ignored before. Behind the manipulation and arrogance, there was a deeply insecure person who didn't know how to build healthy relationships because she had never had adequate models. Melissa, I said softly, family isn't a game where someone needs to lose for another to win. The love I feel for Raphael doesn't diminish the love he feels for you. but respect is something that is built, not imposed. This conversation marked the beginning of a transformation that nobody expected. Melissa began to see me not as a rival, but as a source of wisdom. She began asking me about recipes that Raphael liked, about stories from his childhood, about how to care for a house with love instead of just efficiency. Gradually, the masks were falling, and a person capable of growing and learning emerged. Mrs. Gloria decided to stay a few more weeks, not because she needed medical care, but because she wanted to supervise her daughter's transformation. Melissa is learning important lessons here, she told me. For the first time in her life, she's being confronted with real limits, and she's discovering that the world doesn't crumble when she doesn't get everything the way she wants. Raphael went through his own journey of self-knowledge. In a difficult but necessary conversation, he admitted, "Mom, I was a coward. I knew Melissa was being unfair to you, but it was easier to pretend I didn't see it than to face the conflict. I thought if I pleased her in everything, our marriage would be perfect. But marriage isn't about pleasing, it's about respecting. Seeing my son take responsibility for his own actions was one of the proudest moments of my life." 3 months after that fateful Sunday when I announced my rules, our house had become a completely different place. Melissa developed genuine interest in the garden, and we spent afternoons planting together while she told me about her fears and expectations. Raphael returned to being the affectionate son he had always been, but now with the maturity of a man who learned to balance filial and conjugal love. Mrs. Gloria became like a younger sister, sharing with me her own experiences and regrets about raising children. The master bedroom became mine again, but more than that, I felt like the owner of my own life again. The aromatic plants returned to the kitchen window, the picture frames with family photos returned to their places of honor. The dining table tablecloth returned to having the vibrant colors I had always liked. But the most important change was intangible. Respect had returned to that house. One night, while watering my plants in the garden under the moonlight, Melissa approached me. "Mrs. Carmen, can I confess something? When I arrived in this family, I thought you were old-fashioned, outdated. I thought your stories were boring, that your way of living was limited." She paused, looking at the flowers we now cared for together. "Today I realize that you have something I always wanted and never knew how to define. Dignity. You never need to shout to be respected, never need to manipulate to get what you want, never need to diminish anyone to feel big. That's what I want to learn." Smiling, I replied, "Melissa, dignity isn't something you're born with. It's something you build every day, through the choices we make, the way we treat people, the manner we face difficulties. You're young, you have time to build your own dignity, and now you have a family that will support you on this journey." Today, when I look back and relive each moment of that transformative journey, I realize that the greatest victory wasn't getting my room back or re-establishing my place in the house I built with so much love. The greatest victory was discovering that I had never lost my strength, I had just chosen not to use it out of misdirected kindness. For months, I confused gentleness with submission, confused maternal love with acceptance of disrespect, confused family harmony with silence in the face of injustice. The most powerful lesson that emerged from all this experience was understanding that respect isn't something you ask for, it's something you build through consistent actions and clear limits. For a long time, I made the mistake of believing I would be respected just for being kind and understanding. I learned that kindness without limits doesn't generate respect, it generates abuse, and that establishing limits isn't cruelty, it's self-love and protection of one's own dignity. Today, when young women my age seek me out to tell similar situations they face with daughters-in-law, sons-in-law, or even adult children, I always repeat the same message: never allow them to transform your kindness into weakness. Never accept being disrespected in your own house, in your own life. True love includes healthy limits, and establishing these limits is an act of courage, not cruelty. My story isn't unique. Thousands of women of my generation face similar challenges in a society that changes rapidly and where family roles are constantly being redefined. Many feel lost, invisible, pushed to the background by the very children they raised with so much love. For these women, I want to leave a clear message: you haven't lost your importance by aging. You haven't become obsolete by representing values from other eras. You don't need to accept disrespect to maintain family peace. The house I built with Anthony continues to be our legacy of love, but now it's also a symbol of resistance, of dignity reconquered, of family rebuilt on solid foundations of mutual respect. Every brick we carried so many years ago became the foundation not only of a physical home, but of a family lineage that learned the value of honor, humility, and inner strength. When I lay my head on the pillow of the bedroom I almost lost, I feel the comforting presence of my Anthony whispering words of pride. I feel that I honored his memory not only by preserving the house we built together, but by transforming it into a true home where 3 generations learned to coexist with love and respect. And I sleep in peace, knowing that Carmen Oliveira will never again be silently erased, because I learned that my voice has power, my story has value, and my dignity is not for sale at any price. The greatest reward wasn't getting my room back, it was getting my family back,